It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're reacting and having a discussion about a video from Scott Jund titled Dead by Daylight is designed to be miserable. And I'm interested to hear about this, as I haven't really seen too many videos discussing that it is indeed designed to be in this way, but I can probably give a couple of examples for why it could be. But I'm gonna get into it. Let's dive in.
Of these main tenets is the map design. Map design has been one of Dead by Daylight's biggest issues since the game came out. In fact, like almost 6 years ago, I made this video saying it's the biggest problem in the game, and I pretty much still stand by that, and I think most people actually would stand by that as well. Map design in Dead by Daylight is a large cause of so many of the frustrations in this game. There are...
Yeah, I right off the bat, I gotta say I actually agree with Scott on this, which is kind of shocking because a lot of the time we may not completely see eye to eye on a lot of topics, but this right here really nails it. I mean, what goes without saying, nails it right off the bat. And it only got worse, obviously, with the recent patch that we've gotten, which has to do with the palette density update, which only makes Killer even more miserable to play, on top of the changes we already had gotten before that had to do with the healing perk buffs that the survivors got, which makes healing super efficient. Talking about resurgence, botany knowledge, will make it can stack with that. Empathic connection. On top of that, we also now have a vigil buff as well, which was completely unnecessary, giving vigil a 66% status effect recovery speed now. So that's just lovely, as if we needed that. And on top of that, the new survivor also brings ghost nodes, so that also greatly reduces your exhaustion even more by another additional 11%. I think, no, 10%. 10% as well, so then that directly buffs the exhaustion perks, which directly affects the maps as well, because if they can sprint burst into a giant pack of pallets, like, what are you supposed to really do in that situation? And yeah, I mean, that already sums it up. I mean, you could even talk about how things even spawn in. There's a lot of the time you'll just get windows that connect directly into shack window. You get the chapel map. I always forget what the heck it's called. I think it was like Campbell's or something like that. But there's a god window that could just spawn there, that they can just shift tech, as they call it, which is blatantly an exploit. They can just do that and create an infinite. I mean, Swamp still has like these ridiculous logs that have like insane like an insane just window in the center of it that you either have to vault and just kind of wait because you can't mind game it because it's completely safe on most killers. Oh man, I mean, the list goes on, really. I mean, there's so much wrong with the maps that it's actually insane. We can even talk about the lighting on maps. We can talk about just the clutter. We can talk about the hitboxes when it does to do with maps. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I had to agree right off the bat with that point.
So many variances in terms of balance with regards to maps in this game that the game itself becomes basically impossible to balance. Now, the developers have actually gone on record saying that they want certain maps to favor certain sides. They're okay with a particular map being very killer-sided, and they're okay with a map being very survivor-sided, vice versa, and everything in between. They've said that because they want the underdog experience. They like the idea that a bad player can beat a good player if the stars align and they get a map that's really good for them and everything works out for them. They want that to be the case. That's intentional. I don't have a clip of this anymore because it happened in a live stream of theirs that I don't even think it's available anymore, like 4 years ago, but they will without a doubt said that, and many people in the community can attest to that. So
that I think is a little bit concerning that they actually did state that. Now, that was 4 years ago, so we really don't know if that is currently true now. We don't know if that they still believe this, because there were things that they've said in the past that they've gone back on, and we've even, and this game is ever changing as it is by nature, so which we've even noticed in recent memory within the patches of the recent PTB that they dropped. They started now to display, we're aware that these characters are pretty strong, so we're going to change out these bonuses so that they're weaker on the stronger killers, better on the weaker killers. And that to me was interesting because they never displayed or even tried to let anybody know that they understood these characters are better than others. But now they are. So it is possible that we don't entirely know what they believe now compared to back then, but we have yet to see how that goes.
It is something they've gone on record as saying, and that is nice for the underdog story. I can agree. It does feel good when you beat someone that you know you shouldn't have. When you're playing a weak killer and you beat a really strong 4-man team, that feels great. When you escape against a really top-tier killer and you know you shouldn't have, that feels great. The obvious downside to this is it doesn't account for the other side, which is people being robbed because they just got a bad map. That is not only more common, but it's also more memorable due to negativity bias. People remember negative things far more than they remember positive things. So you're not really going to remember the one time you got a good map that you won on because you got that map.
100% agree. Negativity bias is what clouds the minds of every Dead by Daylight player in probably in existence at this point. Which is, I would say that's safe to say. A good majority, I'd say, will do experience a lot of negativity bias, because you see that especially with the Survivor community. A lot of what they complain about is they got tunneled once out of 20 games and they only remember that one game instead of remembering but the rest of them were perfectly normal matches. And it even works that way with killer. Like you'll get maybe 1 or 2 bad matches, and then for the rest of your time playing you're like, well, that was just terrible, this game sucks, and then it bleeds into everything else throughout your matches as well. Works the same exact way. Now the problem is, obviously, I think it ties a little bit into the community itself, because nobody can take a loss with grace and nobody can take a win with grace either, and that usually is where I kind of lean into where the survivors are historically more toxic in in-game chat. And that's pretty much been kind of proven from a test that was conducted by the Brownie, which if you're watching this, make sure you comment, man, to let everybody know how that went. But either way, I could probably also link my thoughts on that video at the end. But either way, like if you do for whatever reason take a loss, like it's never just like you lost and you can just move on. You have to have the end game chat filled with something, or you have to have them bagging you at the gates and stuff like that. They wait out the end game collapse timers. Like it's never just like, all right, I'm gonna move on to my next cool. It's gotta be like they gotta rub it in. And yeah, I mean, like anytime people really remember the game, that's probably what's going to come to mind, because obviously negativity bias ties into how people decide to carry themselves when they do play the game.
Nobody is ever happy losing due to things outside of their control. That always feels bad in everything, in every game, in just...
I agree with that 100%. I think that's the biggest issue that I personally have had with playing killer, is the fact that I can, because as somebody who mains Ghostface, I can input like at least 100% of my effort, and then the survivors will have a perk input 1% of their effort, and then the outcome is way stronger than all the effort I put in. So, for example, right, if you're chasing a survivor and you need to be quick about it so you can actually, say, get your slowdown or whatever have you, and then you get the down, you're like, cool, all right, but they're under a pallet, I have to pick up, because if I don't, I'm not going to get my slowdown, or I'm not going to get this thing. And then you get stunned. You're like, well, okay, you dropped them, now all of that's gone. All the effort you just put in, gone, just from the press of a button, gone. Like whether it be like you got somebody injured, you need your down, oh, they pressed a button, they have an endurance now. Oh, they died off of hook. Oh, perk. Perk exists. He got stunned. They let him go. Like, so it's like those like little things where it's like, you know, the amount of effort obviously varies between killers and even skill level and stuff like that. But that core feeling of like, well, all of that work I just did, and they just get rid of that in a second is insane. Like it's like a terrible feeling, and that's something that as somebody who plays low tiers, like it feels like you gotta put in a lot, and you just gotta, you know, it really requires you to do a lot more. And that just kind of comes to the territory as you know, if you're playing a low tier killer. But that is something that is a bit of a more of an anecdotal, like, this sucks to go up against sort of thing. And you know, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's just a part of how the game goes, unfortunately. That's just how the side functions. Now, that's in comparison to a Survivor, where it's like you can make a mistake, probably still recover, and it takes more mistakes for that from the team that then snowballs into them getting steamrolled for whatever reason. So, for example, like, you have one teammate that could drop a bunch of pallets, and then say you run by and then there's no pallets. Like, you know, that was a mistake that your teammate made, but that now it leads to you. So then you made the mistake of running in there, and then that leads to you going down, and then because the other person wasted more resources as you did that, or doesn't do the objective, then you see it, like, it sort of spreads out, and then, you know, butterfly affects the whole match into something else, in some cases, compared to killer, where you make one mistake that could cost you the game. At least speaking from, you know, a high MMR sort of perspective, because I do play to win. So at least in a lot of cases when I've played, if I don't get it down before a certain point, or if I don't get a kill for a certain point, or if I don't land my hit right when I need it to land, or whatever have you, it can pretty much change the game entirely in the matter of a second, in comparison. And I think that is another thing that really has something to do with map design. Not entirely, I should say, because map design does come into play, especially with pallets and just windows and stuff like that. That comes into play, of course, but probably not like the biggest you know, point there.
Next of the main tenets of this whole video is perk balance. Now, you might think perk balance is not as big of an issue because with the maps, you can't really choose where you go. The game just decides that for you, and you're just stuck with whatever you get. There are some map offerings, but they've been heavily nerfed to where you can't really guarantee maps anymore. So for the most part, you don't really have control over the map that you go to. Perks, on the other hand, you do have a lot more control over, so it's not as big of an issue. While that is true, it's not as big of an issue. It's still an absolutely massive issue to the game, because perks basically exist to band-aid problems with Dead by Daylight. That's just simply how they've done it. Perks are just things that you can equip on your killer or survivor that bestow various effects, and Dead by Daylight has a lot of problems, and they don't ever really try to fix the problems themselves. They try to normally throw perks on top of that so you can equip things that fix these issues. Let me just give you a perfect example of the insane disparity between perks. Let me give you an example of someone being tunneled off the hook. If you're unaware what that phrase means, tunneling off the hook is when someone has been put on a hook because they were downed by the killer, and to be tunneled off the hook is as soon as that person gets unhooked, the killer beams right back to them and immediately tries to down them again. Now, there are a couple of built-in protections for this, but they don't last very long, and let's give a perfect example. Let's say someone has a healing build. They have a bunch of healing perks on. They can heal people really fast, and that's what they brought. Not even a meme build. It's not a joke build. It's a very strong build. It just doesn't have anything to do with getting tunneled. So you get hooked, then some survivor unhooks you, then the killer immediately decides to tunnel you. What's going to happen is the killer is going to wait 10 seconds because you have 10 seconds of basically invulnerability off a hook.
Well, the one thing I want to jump in and add in is, because of how Dead by Daylight is that where it's such an extremely nuanced game. In this example, we kind of need to know what perk that is, like what the build is and what is considered strong in this example. Because something I can say is strong probably can differ from somebody else's opinion. So I understand where the point is going, but I just want to say that, like, I need to, at least I need to know, like, what build would be considered strong in this instance. Because yeah, of course, like, if you don't have anything directly for anti-tunnel, it might be a problem. But what if my example was, which obviously he did mention it wasn't any anti-tunnel percent. But say for the sake of example, if you had sprint burst, you probably would be able to fly off, right? Which could gain you the distance you need to reach a strong tile, which means that, you know, you at that point it becomes a survivor. It's up to the survivor whether they can hold their own or not, because they need to be able to understand, you know, how to play, what to do in that situation. And if we are taking into account that they're bringing a strong build, that would also assume that they know what is strong in the game, which should then mean that they at least have some knowledge of what they're doing. Now, if it's somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, then that would also, you know, be a slightly different situation, because then it's like, why are you using these perks that you think are strong? Which then therefore leads back to what is the example we're using to say what is a strong build that isn't anti-tunnel in this situation. So yeah, I don't know. Obviously, we don't have that yet in the example, but it really is dependent on the perks, because if it is some kind of perk where it is like sprint burst or some kind of like exhaustion recharge or something like that to help them out in chase and with windows or something, if that's considered strong, then they have the options in order to be able to chain loops and go around and use exhaustion barrier and understand where to go, and then therefore it leads to a skill issue, which is on their end a lot of the time.
After that 10 seconds, he's just going to smack you. You're going to go down. He's going to pick you up and put you back on the hook. You're now one step closer to dying. You didn't really get to do anything. That's that. So that feels terrible. Now let's go over.
But that's where I want to tie it back into the survivor skill issue, because the way that you continue to do something is if you actually can hold your own. And obviously, if we're taking into the current patch, we have 1,000 pallets in every map now. At this point, it really shouldn't be an issue, in my opinion. But that's just how I see it. Now, if you do end up just kind of going down pretty quickly, there needs to be a level of self-awareness that either if there is no resource around, it's possible your teammates are using it and therefore it's not your fault. And the other idea is that if you're not able to hold your own, that's not really the fault of the killer or the fault of the game. That's just, you know, yourself not really understanding how to play around certain things or how to dodge certain things or whatever have you, and not utilizing what you have at your disposal. Because if you do hold your own against a killer, they're probably gonna leave, because they're like, I can't get this down any quicker than this. I need to break off and start a new chase somewhere else or defend the gen somewhere else, and then you'll survive, and then you can live to fight for another chase. So that particular example, I have to say, is a little bit flawed in the sense that we need to take into account that, you know, not everybody is super skilled, you know, at the game by any means. But we also need to understand that there is a level of nuance when it comes down to a topic like this. And of course, in this instance, it really is extremely dependent on the player themselves.
For someone that didn't have a healing build, they have a specifically anti-tunnel build. So what happens is the killer will wait 10 seconds and he goes to hit, except you had off the record. So now the killer actually doesn't down you. Off the record gives you basically 40 seconds of protection off the hook now. So now you get hit, you get a speed burst, you get to go further. Killer's got to catch back up, get another hit. Killer finally catches up, out mind games you, whatever, downs you, then picks you up. Except, nope, you have Decisive Strike. Decisive Strike is a perk that allows you to stun the killer when they pick you up if you've been recently hooked. So now you are stunned, killer drops you, and they're just going to have to chase you again. So then you get another 20 seconds of distance or 15 seconds of distance or what have you, depends on the map. And the killer finally catches up, and now they down you, or they try to down you, they swing at you, except now you have the perk Dead Hard, which activates after you've been unhooked, and when you press a button, you get a brief invulnerability window, basically. So the killer hits you during that, and yet again, you've been hit a third time, and you get another speed burst, and the killer's got to chase you again. This process takes...
So that right there is what I was referring to in the previous example with the map balancing and stuff like that. You know, and obviously that's more of a perk issue, which is what this topic here is about. But yeah, that was the example I was sort of referring to. Like, especially if you are playing as a low tier, and especially like a good example that was being shown in the clip, if you're playing Ghostface, like a lot of second chances are going to be extremely, extremely detrimental because that's a character that does not have map traversal, does not have anti-loop. His only strength is being able to have somebody take one less hit to down and just being able to not be heard as quickly or maybe not as seen as quickly to be able to maybe close the gap to prevent having a longer chase than it should be. And that ties right back into like why I don't recommend using like I have like a good list of perks that I just do not recommend on Ghostface. And I think for anybody listening, if you want to see a video like that where I'm ranking every perk, every killer perk for how good they are on Ghostface, I can probably do that. I feel like it's a very hyper specific tier list, but I feel like it might be very helpful for people that maybe need to, you know, kind of understand like what kind of perks are really going to be the most optimal, you know, because there's a difference between like something that's fun to use on a character versus like it being optimal where it like leans perfectly into what they do as a killer. Two different things, of course. So obviously if you're looking for optimal, I can try to create that. Just let me know in the comments if you want to see a video like that, and we'll be able to put that up at some point. So in this case, obviously, you know, with the anti-tunnel and stuff like that, as you have seen in this example, like it can be very effective against a character like Ghostface, a character that is low tier. And that is sort of what I was referring to earlier, and also is what I look at when I'm thinking about like a strong build, especially against a killer, and especially, you know, with the meta nowadays. And that's like one of the things that I think people really comes to mind when people talk about perk balance, because like there are perks like that essentially are rewarding you for playing badly most of the time, because the people that are using these perks are usually the players that are getting down the quickest, and yet they're just using these perks to gain another chance, if you will, or second chance perks when they didn't really earn it. And that is you know, been one of my biggest issues when facing perks like these, because it doesn't seem like you're being rewarded for actually engaging with the game in a way that requires you to use your brain, in my opinion. Because of the fact that you're just getting downed, and then you have to be downed within 60 seconds, which the timer starts right after being unhooked. So you have to get downed, and I don't think that DS tends to run out unless they deliberately force it out of the killer by jumping into a locker. And then, of course, Dead Hard is also just one of those perks that, once again, you know, press of a button, you get your second chance, which, you know, in my opinion, I think is very like anti-skill, in my opinion. Now, is there a level of skill where you need to be able to sort of dodge it as a killer? Of course. Like I've seen plenty of killers that are not aware of that and they swing right into it, and that in itself is a skill issue on their end. And I've even made that mistake plenty of times too, because I just forget like that it's meta sometimes. So I'm just trying to get the down fast and then, you know, end up eating it, which is unfortunate. And Off the Record is just sort of one of those perks where I wish it kind of stayed where it was, which it being like it doesn't give you endurance or anything like that. It's like because they just use that perk to get in the way and try to body block, and then wonder why they're getting tunneled. And it's like you decided to stay in the way, like it's supposed to be defensive. But anyway,
like an additional minute because you clicked 3 buttons. That is the insane disparity here. That is now suddenly a game-winning decision from the killer is now a game-losing decision from the killer because of a particular build that a survivor decided to put on.
I 100% agree with Scott on that. And that was my point, I think, when talking about the perk balance, is like that, you know, and I've always made like videos about this because there's a very big like sort of gap where it's like killer is like, all right, you need to make sure that it's the sun is shining a certain angle, and then you have to also make sure you look up when you do this, and then you have to look down at your watch and make sure it's at least 2 seconds, and then you got to make sure after that those conditions are met, then you got to slap them twice and not a third time with your ability, because if you do that it'll reset the timer. So then you have to make sure you hit them once with an M1, look at the sky, then sniff the air first, plant some roses, then come back, go ahead and down them again, then you'll get like 5% off of 1 gen. The hell is all of that? Like, just to have like this okay bonus that gets reversed in a couple seconds. Like, you're like, what the heck is all of that? Or you have like a really cool perk that like does something interesting and it's like, oh, but it's a totem. And then, you know, like the totems just have like these big neon signs saying, break me, break me. And there's a bunch of lights and there's a beam coming from the sky, like shining on it. Like, it just has everything working for you in that sense. Like, totems are hot garbage. You know, and it's like, the gap is insane on that, you know? And guess what? If you lose that totem, well, I guess it's just gone for the rest of your game, so it looks like you have no perks. Like, and it's like, why the heck do I have to do all of this work, but yet the survivor got downed because they played bad, and now they have at least 2 to 3 second chance perks just active now. I'm like, what are we talking about? Now, that's not to say that there isn't any well-designed survivor perks. I think Distortion is a fantastic perk for what it became, because it used to be like the perfect ratting perk where you just have free aura blocking for no reason with no other way to recharge it besides ratting. And the issue obviously was that that's what people would do with it. And I always thought it was ridiculous, because then it would end up leading to matches that you kind of sit there for a long time, can't find anybody, because of the sort of ability to rat that quickly, which I don't really think I see that too much on Ghostface though, but I know that maybe on my other killers that I don't really use too often, if I can recall. I think there was, I don't remember what killer I was playing, but I remember on Dead Dog it was pretty tough because there was a lot of tall grass and I couldn't find them at that point. But anyway, I like the fact that Distortion now is you can get tokens and then you recharge it while being in chase. That directly rewards you for playing well. Another one I like, Smash It. I wish more perks on Survivor were like Smash It, where you actually have to, you know, you have to basically reach a prerequisite by interacting directly with the killer. Like, that is fantastic. I'm like, that's exactly how killer perks work. Like, you have to directly interact with the survivors in some kind of way to get the best you can get out of it. So, for example, like Pain Res being like one of the more stronger slowdowns, you had to directly down somebody and then find the correct hook to hook them on. So it's not just like any hook you want. You have to maybe be in the right place at the right time and down them quickly enough to get some good value out of it. So that's really cool. Now, are there other perks that are like more passive that are, I would disagree entirely that it would be like super like game changing to have, but something like lethal or something like that, depending on the killer, of course, could be considered like a passive sort of perk that is like pretty insane, depending. But that's its own discussion. I mean, that's a perk by perk discussion, not really something I can just kind of blanket all into one statement. But yeah, I mean, at least when it comes down to killer meta and survivor meta, like the meta for survivor usually consists of a lot of perks that are extremely passive, like sprint burst lithe, you know, windows and things like that, dead hard, whatever, you know, ghost notes with vigil and all these kinds of stuff. All that stuff is extremely passive. You don't have to interact with the killer in any way to really get any value from it. So that's just my thing with that, of course.
Now, the final tenet of this whole discussion is the matchmaking. Dead by Daylight's matchmaking is legendary for how absurdly terrible it is. It's the kind of matchmaking where you can have one game with people that are nearly impossible to beat and another game right after where they have no idea what they're doing. And there's just no way to understand what you're going to get. And that's because the way that this system determines skill is absolutely terrible. For survivors, it's counted as a win if you simply escape the match. Nothing else matters. Meaning, if you ran the killer for 45 minutes while your team did 7,000 generators, but then you die at the end because of that, you're worse than your teammates whose MMR goes up and yours goes down. The game does not account for actual skill on the survivor side. On the killer side, it's a bit more fair, because typically if you're killing everybody, you're probably doing a good job. But for survivor, there are so many variables that go into it that to have a system that is so vague and only goes off of one metric, you're going to have a scenario where even if people have the exact same MMR, their skill levels can wildly differ. So the system, even if it worked perfectly, would still be flawed because the values that people are being rated on are completely inaccurate.
I had to 100% agree with Scott on that, and I think that on average going against like very tough opponents, and I think most of the time they're in Swifts because of how extremely efficient and coordinated they can be. And there are other occasions where I just end up getting like maybe some more like newer players or solo queue players, and it just kind of is how the game kind of works. Now the thing is that, and on top of that, of course, I think it's just because of how the MMR sort of functions. I mean, if it's only basing it off of if you're getting kills as a killer, or if you're only like if you're escaping, and I even heard that they said that it has to be through the gate that it actually counts. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if that's still true, but I remember hearing that over the years. Like they said that if it was through the gate, that raises MMR. If it's through the hatch, it does nothing. So on paper, I can see how that makes sense, because like if killer is killing, then therefore you're probably not playing well and you're losing. But then on top of that, obviously, let's also take into account that the killer might be pretty bad, but the survivors like fumble at the end and then he ends up winning. Or you have it the other way around, where survivors are terrible, but because of how the game works with its ridiculous, you know, objective being as quick as the speed of light, you can have people like killers that are actually good at the game, but you'll end up getting just the objective gets done within seconds and there's not really much they can do about it. And I feel like that's probably why it's so weird with the matchmaking as well, is that it's just so wonky in that sense. And I think that plays a part into why it seems so like strange, I guess, when it comes down to having lobbies just be so random, despite it supposedly being a skill-based thing. So that is an interesting sort of perspective to have on it, I guess.
That too. Now they did that because they kind of had to. When they first introduced MMR, there was a time, a very short time, where actually the system worked pretty well and it accurately put people of the exact same MMRs together, except people were waiting an hour for a game. Content creators couldn't play the game anymore. Like, we actually just had to stop playing DVD because you had to wait an hour for a match.
And that right there is why the matchmaking is as wonky as it is. So thank you, Scott, for putting that out for everybody who probably isn't aware of that. And that is something that I literally just forgot to just mention. So basically, just to try to summarize, it is essentially focusing on your skill level first, and then of course it also takes into account the queue time. So I'm pretty sure, because it's trying to prioritize queue time first, or at least it's some kind of balancing act between, okay, you should be able to go against this type of team, but also you should be able to match quickly. So let's try to you know, match between those, find the right one. And I think that's what kind of makes it shift around in the way that it does. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's try to dive in to the endless cycle section.
To this endless cycle. In a nutshell, this is the cycle. You can just play casually, having a good time.
Interesting. Let me take a look at this. So it says play casually, then it says encounter difficulty mismatch, then it says the last thing I win against is unfair. I will bring stronger to negate this obvious imbalance. Next game is massive overkill due to encounter difficulty mismatch, and then you continue to play casually. Now, the thing is, right? Let me know what you guys like, what your guys like sort of flow chart looks like for you. For me, it's like play to win, encounter difficulty difficult match, sweat and potentially win, load back in, clearly stressed out, and then you know, encounter more difficult matches. I don't even know how to just basically, like, I think mine is way smaller. It's just like play to win, the match is difficult, I'm exhausted, write down matches in the spreadsheet, play to win with the low tier, have tough matches, the game, like, it's exhausting, put it in the spreadsheet, play to win, like, you know what I mean? And then like from there, it's like you'll get like a smaller like link that attaches out of it that goes like slight adjust build to optimize or something like that. That's sort of how mine would go, I think. But is this like how the majority of people, like when they play the game goes? Like they play extremely casually, then they encounter a difficulty mismatch, then they say it's unfair, then they decide like I'm gonna bring something to negate it, but then but then it's like way too much of a steamroll, so then they want to play casually again, but then because they won, it makes it more difficult again, so then they have to, okay. I mean, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that could go. The thing is, I don't play casually, so I really don't know if that is if that's gonna be the same for me. Like, I mean, matches are difficult, but I expect them to be difficult because I'm playing to win and I'm trying to kind of stay within that MMR level, and I'm trying to optimize, and that's just like what I've been doing, especially for like data and like spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff that I've been sort of working on. But I do see like where other people are coming from when they can look at this flowchart and say like, nah, this is how it goes. Like, and I can see that because this is the MMR in play, I think, because like you probably are at a point where you are trying to just kind of play casually, but they're going against sweat balls, so then you want to try to prepare yourself for the sweat balls again, but then you didn't need to, and then you end up just playing casually again, which is like, I don't know, like I do think that with something like this, it makes me think that it could be a perspective thing, where it's like you just put on a build you think would be cool, I guess, or fun for yourself, and then, you know, I think it's to me, I think it's the mindset of like, well, if I'm playing casually and they're sweating, it really shouldn't matter because I'm playing casually. So if my MMR goes down, I'm just gonna end up going against more like newer players, and it'll be more casual anyway. So I think that is like something that people can adopt, because I've even spoken about this with the Twins main Sage video that in the other little while ago that talked about not trying to be in high MMR, and apparently Twins main Stage stated that they played in low, high, and average, and they found that average was like the sort of the sort of Goldilocks, you know, porridge feel, where it's like just right, where it's like not too sweaty but not too like or too casual where they're like they don't know what they're doing, where they can kind of just chill. And I think I'm like, okay, that seems like a really good thing that people can adopt as well. And I think that mindset really can help a lot of people sort of step into the game with a better vision and a better expectation for how they want to approach the game. Because for me, like I'm trying to win my game, so of course I'm gonna encounter tough games, so I can't really like crash out that much, in the sense that I have to still be completely fully aware that this is going to be hard. Like it's what I'm going up against. This is what I chose to put myself into, as annoying as it can be, because of the fact that the strongest stuff in the game is extremely unbalanced on Survivor because of the lack of input they need to have to create such a massive amount of pressure for doing basically nothing, which is a whole nother discussion. That's not what we're talking about here. But either way, those are my thoughts on the video. I'll have the original linked in the description, so you can watch the full thing, hear all the points, and without any interruptions, of course. While you're down there, consider supporting the channel with the links in the description. Consider joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member, or even subbing on Twitch to have your name read off at the end of every video, and for also exclusive perks on Patreon and exclusive perks on the YouTube memberships. So with that being said, appreciate you guys for being here, and I will see you guys in the next one. Check out one of the other videos. Stay tuned for the names and all my members at the end. Well, I wanted to go ahead and take some time out to thank all my members from Patreon with Crow King 101, my YouTube members, Majora Jeff, Endire, Evil Peachy YT, Zero Mocker, Christian, Hexdev, and Crow Vader, and for my Twitch subscribers, Cake is the Road, Danica 2002, Final Girl _ Bunny, Acklefin, Chili Cinderace, Zero Mocker, Ginsburg, Johns 117 _ Lovely Ghost TTV, Jar TTV, Zazaboo, and Crow Vader. Just wanted to thank you guys. And if you also want to have your name read off at the end of every video, make sure you join on one of these platforms to get one of those perks, as well as the other perks you get. So appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much.